Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the award winning recovery podcast, Get in the Herd, brought to you by the McShin Recovery Resource Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. Today, well, first of all, I am your host. I always forget to introduce myself. It's the most
Who
bizarre
are
thing.
you?
That is the question, but thank you. We'll get to my psychotherapy later. Um, my name is Nathan Mitchell. I'll be your host today. We've got down in the corner. I love this new little feature we're using here. We've got Justin Bognar in
How's
the
it going,
corner.
everyone?
Hey, Justin. Today in the herd, we've got a very special guest. She is a volunteer here at the McShin Foundation. Volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah, volunteer, facilitating groups with the women, doing one-on-ones with the women, and she has written a book, and so that book gets released on Sunday. That's correct, right?
I think it's around Sunday. It is available for purchase now through the publisher, but
Oh,
it's going to be released wider within the next week or
w-
so.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
our guest today is Mandie or Amanda Brando, and the book is State Blues. So, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why on earth would you want to go and write a book? Tell me about that.
Um, so it started. I was in jail, and I had been in the Rise program,
Mhm.
which groups like 12 hours a day. I mean, from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and
Well,
um,
so for anybody who's watching and may not know, what is the Rise program?
recovery in a secure environment. It's essentially a therapeutic community or a rehab in jail.
Okay.
And that's at Henrico East. Um, and I got kicked out
Wait, what?
after I completed the program. And I got transferred over to the B side of the pod, and I had all this free time. So I was sitting around one day, and I love to write, and I was kind of noticing some things, and I was like, let me just write about it. And so I wrote like a page and a half, and then
Ah.
the way it ended, I was like, well, that sounds kind of mean, maybe I should continue. So I wrote some more, and then I was like, this could be a good way to spend my time. And pretty soon, like, the entire pod was in on it, like, oh, write about me and put me in there, and don't forget to mention this. So
Yeah.
yeah, it became a group activity. It was kind of fun.
That's awesome. So your book takes us through that journey. Part of that journey. This is going to sound funny because I know we just talked about it, but part of that journey talks about you cooking while you were there, and
Yes.
I bring this up because there's a I thought that was a bag of chips. That's not a bag of chips. I'm blind as a bat. But we were talking before the show about cooking in jail, and
Yes.
we brought up the Cheetos and the flaming hot Cheetos and
Hmm.
stuff. Tell us, where did you find your best, I guess, ideas? But who did you connect with the people that you were with in jail, and how did those relationships form?
I think anytime you go through an intensive program like that, you naturally you form a strong bond. And one thing I like in being locked up with other women too is kind of like in the military, they have battle buddies because you're going through something together.
Yeah.
So you definitely form really strong relationships. I tried to gravitate towards the people who were, trying to better themselves and use that time wisely, and accept a leadership position in that community. um, but I actually talk about in the book how being locked up with someone is kind of like dog years. Like, oh, I've been locked up with you for 3 months, times seven. That's almost 2 years. Because it feels like that because you are with these people
Oh yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you really do form some really strong bonds. And it's I met incredible people while I was there. I met some not so incredible people while I was there, but I'm still in touch with at least 50 women that I was
Wow.
in jail with.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Rise program and getting involved with that, but how did you know about the Rise program? How were you introduced, and how did you get accepted into that program?
Okay. So again, like, it's neat because this is like the book itself talks about my experience getting locked up and going through the trial phase and going to Henrico West, which is the main facility, and then finding out about East. And it was so funny because women would just kind of randomly get called B and B, which is bodies and bags, to get packed up and moved. And I was like, where's everybody going? Like, they're going to East. And I was like, what is East? Like, well, it's a whole nother facility. And we talked about it like it was kind of this mythical place. Like,
Like
it's
Oz.
cleaner and it's larger, and there are some single cells. And I was like, what is this place? I must get there.
Sing Are there single cells in fact there?
There are.
Yeah.
And I had one the entire time I was there, just about. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I had when I was in jail the first time, I got to the point where I had two pillows and two mats, and I was doubled up in the, but I was on the bottom bunk, I think, for most of the time. But and that lasted for most of that time, that first time, until somebody did something stupid and we got shakedown, and like
Of course.
everybody lost their extra pillows and
Yeah.
their pens, and the
Yeah.
five freaking extra rolls of toilet paper and state
Everything.
toothpaste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so you found out about this Rise program through the B&B. I love that, bodies and bags. I
Yeah.
and you went over there. Did you have to what, fill out a form?
I had to apply to go there. East is a smaller sort of facility. It doesn't have room for the whole incarcerated population of Henrico. So it's very sort of select. You have to exhibit good behavior to get there. And generally, to initially be transferred there, you have to want to be in the program,
Yeah.
Rise, or do an educational program.
Hmm.
Um, so I said, I don't know about this rehab thing in jail, but it sounds like it's a better facility, so I'll give it a whirl.
Was the food better over there? No, no,
Maybe slightly, but
slightly. Well, you cooked while you were there.
I did.
We should probably explain cooking. I mean, most of the people who watch our program are currently incarcerated, but
So they know.
they know, right? I mean, believe me, swoles I found out are delicious.
Well, it's so
Yeah.
funny because initially I refused to cook or be involved in that process because I was like, I want nothing to do with ramen noodles or mayonnaise,
No, but
which are the two main ingredients of jail cooking. Um,
you're
but
right, though.
eventually, um, I just kind of sat with some girls, and they were like, try it, just try it, give it a whirl. And I took a bite and I was like, okay, well, it's not bad. It's better than the dining hall.
Mm.
So I got into it, and I was particularly known for using every type of spicy ingredient that you could use. I used the spicy sausage, the hot pickles, the flaming hot Cheetos, spicy ramen. I mean, people were like, I can't eat your food because it upsets my stomach. And I was like, good, more for me.
More for me. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Not that I ever want to really reminisce on my time in jail with like, but it's like it's what you make of it, right? Every experience, and the fondest memories I have, are being with everybody, and yeah, we had to kind of sneak a trash bag, and
Right.
and all the things that we had to do to accomplish this task, but it was a really amazing exercise in working together, because everybody would throw in, and even those who didn't throw in, like anybody new, we fed them,
Right.
which was neat. I mean, then of course, it was like, all right, well, we fed you, come on now, contribute.
Yeah.
But we found it was a really, the more I look back at it, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and go too fondly into it, but
Right.
there was a lot of learning stuff about myself that I just didn't know. How I
Yeah.
can work with people who are different than I am, how people can work with me when I'm different than they are,
Yeah.
and or finding I guess not working with different people, but just finding commonality is in community, within, essentially, you talked about bonds. I mean, these are trauma bonds, is what they are.
They are. And, that's one thing that, I talk about in the book how my priest, Father Rick, visited me every week while I was in there. And he himself was in recovery.
Mm,
And he used to come down on me and be very real and honest with me. And he'd say, identify your way in. Don't compare your way out. You
mhm.
have more in common with people than you think. And I always found that really useful because I'd see someone who maybe I couldn't relate to, and then we'd turn out to have all these commonalities that we could bond over.
Yeah.
So I think it was a useful experience. I'm not going to say I enjoyed it necessarily, but
Yeah, I useful though, I think is really, A great word. I never thought of that word for me, but I think that really does work for me as well. I mean,
Hmm.
my experience, and by no means was my experience that long. I had, 18 days the first time, and I had
Right.
63 the next time. So and three of those, though, I'll tell you, the first three of that 63-day bit, that was in DC. So that was, and I was, coming down. So that was
Sure.
not fun. But it gives me, it gives me perspective, a
Yeah.
little perspective. And I love, because now, my favorite thing that we do with this is that we give it to individuals, incarcerated,
Yeah.
who are incarcerated. And so, you know I know it's not fun, but at the same time we found common ground, like we found community. I got to have some really amazing conversations with people there. um and I learned about myself. I took the time and I learned about myself, and I grew. I mean, in those that second bit, that 63-day bit, I that's when I was introduced to McShin. And for me, that was the beginning of my recovery journey. Never mind that I'd had legal issues for the year and a half before I went in, that, or even more, actually. I guess it was probably, yeah, about a year and a half.
Hmm.
Um, that was my first introduction to recovery and what that meant. And it took, like, people who came into the jails and said, what, I was in your shoes and now I'm doing okay. And
Yeah.
my life isn't perfect, but this is what I do to get through these things. I also had, it wasn't my priest, but it was a priest who came in. And I talk about all the people that used to come in and out of the jails and try to, whatever, bring us whatever. And most of the people who would come in, I almost felt like we were on exhibit sometimes,
Yeah.
and they sort of contributed to that, in the way they acted with us or interacted with us and talking down and condescending. And I was like,
Right.
okay. And I just politely listened, or sometimes just went back into my cell and said, but there was a priest who came in, and I struggle, I struggled, still continue, I think, struggle with my sort of latent Catholicism, and growing up Catholic, or pseudo Catholic. And, when I saw this priest come in, I had all these expectations that came with him. And he looked like my grandfather, which was a good thing, that. And so I was immediately disarmed, sort of, with him when he came in. But he wasn't the one who came in and talked down at us. He came in and really, he wasn't in recovery, but he came in and he just talked with us.
Hmm.
He just shared time with us. And it wasn't he said he came in, I think the first time he came in, and said he would hear confession. I was like, well, I want to get out of here for a few minutes. So I'll go confess. And then, I sat with him and I'm like, all right, well, let's get this off the ground right off the bat. Let's get this out in the air. It's like, I'm not confessing to being gay because I don't think it's a sin, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't have an issue. I mean, like, probably Catholic Church and yada yada, but like, he was like, all right, well, cool. And then he gave me some other resources over the next couple months about, like, organizations that work with AIDS and HIV patients and things like that are Catholic groups and stuff. And he expanded he made me more open minded, but he also gave me something when I got out. I went to mass and I saw him and I wrote to him a couple times after that. I need to get in touch with Father John.
Yeah.
But that was an awesome experience because it gave me more perspective. It wasn't just somebody talking down at me.
Right. And I think that's one thing is it's easy to relate to for me is you feel when you're incarcerated that people are are looking down on
Yeah.
you and judging you. And you feel a little bit like you're on exhibit and you've just become a statistic. Um, and I said, I reached a conclusion at, very early on in being incarcerated that if I'm going to have to be away from my family and my children and my life for what felt like a really long period of time for me, I'm going to make the most of it. And when you start with the publishing process of a book, they always ask you, well, who is this for?
Yeah.
And I said, this is for the people I was locked up with. This is for the people who are still incarcerated to know you're not on exhibit. You're not a statistic. This does not have to be your life. And you can go somewhere from there.
Yeah.
Because I went from being incarcerated, I was called a lost cause, to being really happy today where I'm at in my life. So
Well, let's talk about that. So, are you still on probation?
no,
You're off paper, all that
I
stuff?
am off paper. I have my right to vote back. I just got to vote in November, and Um, at one point in my whole journey, I was actually a civics teacher. So
Yeah.
getting my right to vote back was a big, big deal. And I took my 10-year-old with me and, showed him about this is voting and why it's important, and then promptly burst into tears walking out like, oh my God, I just voted on a citizen again.
That was something that was so eye-opening for me, through that experience, because I've worked in different fields, and and I've worked with a lot of, but I was very whatever. But that particular issue, I mean, I had no idea that would
Yeah,
be a problem in Virginia, and I'm literally a felon because of my disease. I have the disease of
right.
addiction, and regardless, actually, I'm a felon and I should be able to vote. That's my view, and I'm a felon as a direct result of the disease of addiction.
We have criminalized the disease
Yeah,
of addiction. We have attempted to incarcerate our way out of that problem. It's clearly not working. And then what we're doing is we're taking this, I mean, really huge segment of people who are addicts, who are felons as a result of that. And then we are disenfranchising them. We're saying, now you can't even vote. You can't raise your voice about this issue that affects you.
yeah.
So I think that in and of itself is criminal.
I agree with you 100%. And so, that was one of the first things I did when I realized that and I got out. It's like, all right, I started making noise about that,
Hmm.
yeah, and talking about that with everybody, I could, and including our congresswoman. There's my story is that in 2019, I just kind of started in my position, and there was an election in Virginia for the entire General Assembly, the House and the state Senate. And while they were having the election, I was, and anywhere I could go, I would show up. And that meant at one point, I kept bumping into our Congresswoman,
Sure.
Abigail Spanberger, and we I'd listen to her and whatnot, but it was always a local thing until I went an hour or so away, like to Louisa, and I went to an event, and I this woman who was running, she lost, but she was running, and she'd come and she'd visit us here at McShin, and I thought, well, I'm going to go return and go see her. I thought that would be, nice. And I bumped into our congresswoman, and she's like, she looks at me, Nathan, I see you everywhere. Why are you everywhere? And I said, because I can't vote.
Yeah.
And she's like, and I told her, I explained why. I mean, she knew why. I mean, I told her, and that was poignant. And fast forward to the beginning of this year, 2021, when I went to some event, before we went into the Delta variant, we thought we were in the
Yeah.
clear. I went to an event, and I think it was like 20 small business owners and Spanberger. And, I raised my hand to share something or ask a question and whatever. And I said, oh, before I share, I want to let you know I got to vote last year, and I got to vote for you. It was fun for me. And she remembered why that was important. And she stopped and she actually explained that to the people who were there. And I thought it was neat that she remembered also, but it is another one of those, you know, I get to do that now. I mean,
Yeah.
like I get to like when we have events here at McShin, I'm always saying, all right, who needs to come in and get their voting rights back? Let's go check on that. I got the site right here, and let's do that. And that's so important to have the voice heard.
It really is, and I think it's important to allow people to to have that voice, especially regarding addiction, which really affects the entire community. You have so many associated costs and stuff like that. We
Yeah,
absolutely should have a right to speak about that. And that's one of the things I love about McShin is they really focus on advocacy and reducing the stigma
yeah.
and things of that nature. I think that's really helpful, really good.
I'm really interested, pivoting from this. I'm really interested to know how long were you in jail?
Um, about a year and a half, a
About a year
little
and a half.
less than a year and a half. I think it came out to like 16 months.
Okay. So while you were in jail, tell me about how your family, because I know you have two children,
I do.
and I know your father, your family's all local here. So tell me how those relationships were transformed while before you went in, and while you were
Mhm.
there.
That's a tough thing to handle, especially being a mother incarcerated. Um, different moms handle it different ways. I chose the route of being 100% honest with my kids. And they were small when I was incarcerated. PJ was 3 or 4, and then Wesley was 9 and 10.
PJ and Wesley?
Yes,
Oh,
those are my
I
babies.
like that. Yeah.
Um, so they were young, and it's a hard thing to understand. Mommy is the one who teaches you right from wrong,
Yeah.
and yet mommy's going to jail isn't jail where the bad people go. And I, sat down and explained, especially to Wesley because he was older, that mommy broke a rule and mommy had to go to adult timeout. Um,
Adult timeout. I
adult
like that.
timeout,
Yeah.
yeah. Because they knew what timeout was about, and I
Yeah.
had to sit down and reflect on what I had done wrong and try to change my behavior. Um, it's tough when you have kids and to know the right way to handle that. And like I said, I just confronted it with honesty. I think the most important thing that I told them, and they've both said, years later, it was 100% true, was I know this is going to feel like a really long time while we're in it, and it's going to be hard for a year and a half, but after the fact, it will seem like a blink of an eye,
Mm.
and you will have a hard time remembering that mommy wasn't here for a year and a half. Um, and I think that's important to keep in mind when you are in that, especially as a mom being incarcerated. It feels like so long when you're there.
Yeah.
But after the fact, you look back and it fades and it's not as intense. And you can heal from it. It's entirely possible. But I tried to parent over the phone and through plate glass, and it was challenging. I was very blessed that, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and I had a really incredible village there for my kids,
Yeah.
to help them and support them. But we got through it.
Yeah.
We have an incredible relationship today.
Yeah. Yeah. You get to be a mom now.
Yes, I do.
That's awesome.
It is.
Um, Walk us through, assuming nobody's read the. Oh, hold on. There's a question up here. It's always tough when a parent has to go on a jumpsuit vacation. Patrick Jones, how fast did you reconnect with them?
Patrick, that's actually PJ's name is Patrick.
Ah,
Um, I like that jumpsuit vacation. You
I
know,
do too.
how fast did I reconnect with them? I'm going to be honest. I don't know that I ever lost connection with them. I talked to them every single day that I was incarcerated. They came to visit me every week. My parents made sure that happened. Um, you know, I got out and came home, and my parents were immediately like, "Okay, you're mom, and you're back, and it's your job." um,
Welcome back from vacation.
Here are your children. um and in some ways that was challenging, but in other ways it was really good because they were like, we're not going to enforce rules. These are your children, these are your rules. And so they did
Mm,
give me that ability. I think the important thing for me to consider in reconnecting with them was not to parent through guilt. Because
ah,
you're really tempted, like, I've been gone for a year and a half, so let me give you everything you want, and I've made mistakes, so I need to make up for that. And there's a certain amount of making up for lost time, but I still have to do what's in your best interest, what you need, not what you want.
mm,
And that's hard to kind of transition into that role again. So I went from being very, over the phone, what did you guys do today? To what do you mean you didn't clean up this mess? And that's a tough transition, but I would have to say, I mean, we really never lost a connection. And if you do, you jump back in. You jump back in as quickly as you can with your children. And, part of that connection was giving them the time and space to say, Mom, I'm angry with you, or Mom, I'm disappointed, or I'm worried about you, and letting them express those feelings. And
And that has that happened?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. I'm angry about this. I'm sad about this. You weren't here for this.
Yeah.
And then that gives them the chance to express themselves, and it gave me a chance to, make amends, as it were. And then we could kind of heal from that and move forward.
Yeah. You now obviously nobody listening will have read your book. Well, actually that's not true. In the future they may have read it at this point, but
Right.
for those who are listening and who may not have read this book yet, um, how did you make the decision to get into recovery? What are the steps leading up to this decision to turn away from?
Yeah. It's funny because when I initially began this book, I thought I was clean.
Hmm.
Um, but
Say more on that.
but I was still drinking right up until
Hmm.
I got locked up, and when I came out, I was still drinking, but I thought I was clean. And that led me right exactly where they told me it would lead me. It led me right back into active addiction. So after this book takes place, I was incarcerated again in Pamunkey for
Hmm.
6 months, which was really tough because I walked out of Henrico like I'm never coming back. Um, and then there I was at Pamunkey. Um, and what did it for me was I had a near fatal overdose. It was my sixth one, but my son, who was 11, found me dead on the bathroom floor. And I swore to him that I would never touch the stuff again. Um, that did not, of course, in my mind, mean other substances. So I went hard after them and got arrested. Of course, you have the whole trial period that I was free during. Um, and then one day, to be somewhat explicit, my dealer didn't have the drug I was asking for and gave me some heroin. And I did that. And I immediately was like, oh my God, I just broke this promise. What if it had killed me? What if I died? What would my son think? And I came home and I literally hit my knees and just said, God, take this from me because I can't do this anymore. This is too big for me. And I had that intense moment of surrender. And I actually took him with me to a meeting that night. And I
Hmm.
cried the whole way through the meeting and picked up a white key tag. And, I've been on that journey ever since. That was April
April.
4th,
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah. Did he know what that white key tag meant at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was well schooled in it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's interesting. That's really fascinating the way you've parented with through all this. Um, now that you've made that decision, and you've you are what you are. Um, what's the work that you're doing now to continue not only your recovery but to help the next sick and suffering?
I read this wonderful thing. It was probably on Facebook about an addict falls in a hole and a psychiatrist comes by and a businessman comes by and a priest comes by and they all try to help. But finally it's another addict who comes by, sees them down there, climbs down in the hole. And they say, oh my God, now we're both in this hole. And the recovering addict says, that's okay. I've gotten out of this hole before. I'll show you the way.
Yeah.
And I read that and that inspired me. I said, that's what I want to do. I want to help the next sick and suffering addict find their way. So I got my PRS training, which is why I'm volunteering at McShin. I'm getting those 500 internship hours so I can become certified,
That's peer recovery specialist training. Yeah.
right? And I am also in school to become a certified substance abuse counselor.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. Which is something I've been saying for years I was going to do. And finally, I just got to the point like, it's time. I'm ready. It's go time.
It's go time.
Jump in, both feet first.
Well, actually, so I'm glad you brought this up. Well, I guess I brought it up, but so there's a difference. I know there's distinctions between what a certified peer recovery specialist does and what a certified substance abuse counselor does. And could you perhaps um, maybe help those individuals by explaining what the difference is?
Sure. I'm honestly still learning a lot
Yeah.
about the differences between. I think a large part of it is a boundary issue. As a PRS, a peer recovery specialist, it is very much this is my experience, and you can learn from my experience. It's some self disclosure. I think the boundary is a little bit more diffuse there. As a certified substance abuse counselor, you depend more on, I want to say, like theoretical knowledge, and assisting people to arrive to their own conclusions
Mhm.
about their own best solution. But from that framework of this is addiction, and I do have some experience with that.
Yeah, that's how I feel. The distinction from what little I know. Oh, you poor thing. Um, we keep it so we turn off the AC in the summertime when we're here because it blasts and makes a lot of loud noises. But the good thing about that, and the same thing with the heat, is that because we have a problem keeping it a good temperature without making a lot of noise, that means usually the hour is just enough where we can stop tolerating, the discomfort that comes along with no air control.
Well, it's so
But
funny because I do groups here, and I wear these, ugly Christmas sweaters. I'm like, how do you guys keep it hot in this building?
It's this floor especially. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's the whole building,
Heat
but
rises.
well, heat rises. But my side of the building, which is the other side of the hallway up there, that just stays at a scorching 150 degrees. It seems
Yeah,
like, and in the wintertime, it'll stay scorching in there and freezing in here. I just
right.
literally have to walk across the hall. In fact, I could just put my desk in the hall and probably have a good temperature right there. Justin, let's talk about your hair, bro.
What about my
I'm
hair?
looking at that lion mane online. Look at that. You see that? That's some righteous hair, man. He's got like a hairband group thing going on.
Look, normally it's in much better shape. Okay.
Okay.
But I've been running my hands through my hair quite a bit today, so all the product has come out.
Oh, and you replaced it with barbecue sauce.
This
We had
this
barbecue.
is the result of what happens if I don't put product in my hair. It turns into a mane.
No, but I think it looks righteous. Like I looked over and I was like, man, let me just
It's
go.
like a Pantene commercial. Just whoosh.
He's kind of like an aging who was the guy that did the butter commercials, the not butter commercials.
Fabio.
Fabio. Yeah. Almost a. Now that's what recovery does for us. It gives us the opportunity to laugh at ourselves.
I actually have a whole chapter in here called laughter
Yeah.
about, and actually the biggest criticism I received of my book is from my ex, who says you make it sound like summer camp.
In jail.
And I said, I don't feel that. And I've asked other people who have read it. I said, do I make it sound like summer camp? And they're like, no, you sound miserable, but you do point out that, you do have fun times, and you can get into trouble, and,
Oh yeah.
you make the best of it. You really do. But I think, for us, especially as recovering addicts, when you're in jail, your brain starts to heal a little bit. You feel better, and you really do get to hear the sound of your own laughter for the
Mm.
first time. And we used to remark on that a lot. Like, we're actually having fun.
Yeah.
And it was because we're not miserable. We are not so caught up in, like, the finding ways and means to get and use more.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were roughly taken care of.
Yeah.
You had 3 meals a day, you had somewhere to sleep, and you could kind of not worry every day.
And I'm glad you say that because I feel that same way. And let's realize though, however, that treatment does not have to happen in the jail cell.
No.
And that's that's what really pisses me off is that we get that argument time and time again from the criminal justice element, police and sheriffs, and who I think, even though I might disagree, I do think are mostly well intentioned. I don't think most people are like, oh, these people are horrible, let's kill them all, let them die.
Right.
Not everybody. I think that most people are genuinely trying to help. I just like we can do better, and in fact the authentic recovery community does better.
We absolutely can do better. And, as much as they may want to say we're trying to help and incarceration helps, the fact of the matter is that most people do not get clean during incarceration. They
Yeah.
may stay clean for that period of time, but statistically, the people who are locked up get out and use again, especially if they don't have access to treatment programs and a supportive community.
Yeah.
So I didn't get clean, not once and for all, in jail.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a that's a tough message to hear.
it is.
It's a tough message to hear. Like there was a participant a couple days ago, and he and I had been we knew each other when I was a participant way back. So, he and I have a long life together, but he returned here maybe a week ago or so, and he he's just not ready. And part of me, when I read the email this morning, you know, I you know, I know better, or I think I know better, that not to take things personally. And still it's my friend. It's
Yeah.
still it's a person I've shared space with, and conversation, and regardless of whether I'm friends or not, I'm still going to feel a little sad when somebody goes out and goes back out.
Yeah.
But there's a tiny part of me, and Justin and I had this conversation in my office this morning, because I was actually pretty down this morning about that and a couple other things. There have been a few deaths recently, and I forget that I'm a grieving person too.
Hmm.
I just power through sometimes, and I'm like, "Oh wait, hold on. That really affects me. That's a person I lived with. That's a person I know about their family, and I've shared many, many meals with. I've cleaned bathrooms with, and car rides with, and and sometimes, even one person recently, like that's a person I lived with in the same room. And that happens to us in recovery a lot, and I sometimes forget to stop and allow myself those feelings, and it bubbles up for me in some in other what's the word I'm looking for?
Other
Uh,
contexts.
Other context, yeah, contexts. Other ways that I'll act out. That's what I was
Hmm.
trying to say. I'll act out in ways, and that are familiar, from using behavior, or just behavior that just no longer serves me, no longer helps
Right.
me. And I've been doing that, more so than usual lately. And I kind of sat down with Justin, who I absolutely freaking love, that I've got a friend, and somebody who's knows me, literally has known me since day one getting here.
Wow.
We sat down and we're like, and I shared some frustrations about some things, and realized, it's me trying to fix, manage, and control somebody else,
Hmm.
and get upset about somebody else's recovery not going the way I want it to go.
Right.
And it's good for me to remember that, we are planting seeds.
And that's important. I actually just did a group today on the stages of change,
Mm.
and how when you're in that, like, pre-contemplation place, the important thing is you want the want. Like, you may not know that you want to quit, but you know that you want to quit, and that's a good jumping off place. um you know you can still learn stuff even if you're maybe not ready, and every time you attack treatment and try and get involved in that recovery process, you learn more and more and more every time until you do get to that place where you can be fully committed. um it's in persistence, it's in perseverance.
Yeah.
you know um it's a challenge. I know, one of the girls who I write about in this book, she actually has a whole chapter. She OD'd years later.
Yeah.
Um, and another girl who has a whole chapter is, I believe, currently incarcerated. So it doesn't always take on the first try. That's okay. It took me 13 arrests, 8 incarcerations, 6 ODs, like, it was a journey, but if you keep at it, you get it eventually.
Yeah. Is there, from that, I love that you brought up the laughter chapter. Do you want to read anything from the book? Am I
Um,
putting you on the spot?
no, 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 no. I came prepared with maybe a little something. Um, we were talking about my kids and
Yeah.
being locked up, and visitation being a particularly wonderful but challenging part of my week. So I actually have a chapter called Little Deaths about visitation, if you guys are interested.
Please.
All right, let's see where it is. Visits were by far the most diverting and initially the most painful part of my week. Unlike most people, I received 2 visits a week, my family on the weekend during regular visiting hours, and then my priest, Father Rick, during a special visit during the week. In some ways, I enjoyed my visits with Father Rick the most. I got adult intellectual conversation with someone who needed relatively little background info. He had known me for nearly 10 years, and we had probably crammed 20 years worth into that. I wasn't rushed during his visits, trying to talk to 4 or 5 people. And he, unlike my family, was very curious about life inside. Father Rick was also in recovery himself, so we spoke a common language between faith and recovery, sometimes riotously, as we had such different drugs of choice. He had been into meth, and I was a heroin user, two opposite ends of the spectrum. Yes, I loved these visits, and they kept me connected to an outside world I desperately missed. It's nice to know you're not forgotten, even as the world moves on without you. It sometimes feels as if you've been placed inside a time capsule. The world keeps moving, changing, evolving on the outside, while you stagnate in some dark chamber, ready and waiting for them to bring you out into the light and marvel over what a relic you've become. You feel forgotten. Father Rick reminded me every week that I was not, all the proof I needed in my heart that God had not forgotten me. I will remain forever indebted to him for that. Family visits were a sound wave. As high as they peaked, were as low as I experienced the trough. I didn't know how to live without my kids, my parents, my family. They were embedded in the very fiber of my being. My true punishment was separation from them, and they were being punished right along with me. In county jail, all visits are through plate glass. At West, you may not even have a phone that works and be forced to yell through the window. In any case, you can only talk to one person at a time through a tinny connection, 4 people at a time, for 45 minutes. It's really difficult if you have little kids. What do you talk to a 4-year old about? He asks every visit if you're coming home now, tomorrow, next week. Having no concept of time, how do you explain to him next year sometime? How do you hold his attention? How do you deal with it when PJ's tired and grumpy and doesn't want to talk on the phone and wants to have a snack and runs away and cries, and you see your baby crying and you want to scoop him up and he wants to be held and you want to kiss it all away, but you can't because of this GD glass and too many damn mistakes, and maybe next week will be a better visit, and you still have to smile. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, because you don't want to upset Wesley, and he wants to tell you about his awards assembly that you weren't at. And mom, aren't you proud? And his new video game and Star Wars and bowling. I got a 127, mom. I'm number one in my league. And you're not there for any of it. But you're so glad that he's still doing well, even while you're in jail. Thank God. Before you know it, you've argued with the husband, talked to your mom and dad, blown kisses through the god awful plate glass, and are shuffled out to the hallway to be taken back upstairs. Finally, you can cry. Some of that great deluge lets loose, and a little piece of you dies inside for one of your family. And some of the women in line with you ask if you're okay, and some ask, what's wrong? And you have to wonder how they don't know, and you have to wonder if this pain is even worth it because it hurts so bad. And then you realize, yes, it is worth it because it was 45 minutes of their beautiful faces, of them, for them. And each week it gets a little easier. And that little piece inside, the one that dies, it will die a little less every week. But I'll tell you a little secret. It was still a little death right up to my very last visit before I went home.
Mm. 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 Wow. That's wow. I'm not often speechless, but that was really well said and really well. I'm right there with that, and I don't even have kids, but I feel that.
Yeah.
That was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Thank you. I actually read that chapter, and I needed to read it in front of people so that I didn't cry while I was reading it. And I actually made another woman cry,
Yeah.
because she related, which makes me feel sort of bad that someone's crying, but it also makes me feel good that I really touched that nerve and I hit upon a truth.
Yeah. How did you all support each other as mothers in jail?
Oh, it's it's very similar to a grief process, I think. When you're grieving someone, I think it's important to remember the happy times and talk about them and keep that alive. And when you're in jail, that's what we do. We're still moms. And oh, you'll never believe what my kids did today, or you'll never believe what they said. Um, at one point, I did earn an in-person face-to-face visit with my kids. Um, and I came right back on the pod, and it was amazing because all the women were like, "Oh my God, tell us all about it." Even though they missed their kids, they were happy I
Yeah.
got to see mine. And my kids had just gone to see The Lion King with my parents,
Oh,
the live stage
wow.
show.
Okay.
And so I had to reenact for everyone. Wesley was like, my favorite creature was the giraffe. And he does this little motion with his hands above his heads and he wobbles and he would walk around going, "Look, Mom, I'm a giraffe." And so I had to go back on the pod and show everybody that. And they loved it, and they shared in that with me. And I will never forget the fact that, rather than being confronted with jealousy or anything of that nature, it was pure support. It was pure happiness for me.
Hmm.
And, the fact that I was shattered after the in-person visit because it was like that's the last time I get to hold my babies for a
Yeah.
while. And they were supportive of, the pain that I was going through.
How could that possibly be confused with summer camp?
um
Was that the person who said that, was that person ever in jail?
that person had been formerly a corrections officer.
Oh,
So I think
interesting.
I think he was
This is your ex?
yeah, we're still married, but we
Oh.
are separated. Um
Wait. I must have missed this. You're married, or you were, well, you're married and currently
I
separated
am
from
married.
a corrections officer.
Yeah. A former
A
corrections
former
officer.
correction. Okay.
Yeah. He actually worked on death row.
Oh, wow.
And he was a deputy for like 12 years prior to that. So it was very interesting being in a relationship and being on opposite sides of the bars.
Yeah.
But
That
I think that's one of the
that
reasons.
GD plexiglass.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the reasons why he interpreted it the way he did, because he's used to seeing it from a certain perspective. And I'm like, well, from inside, you gotta do something,
Right.
you know.
Right. No, it's the idea that, okay, we're going to go in there and we're going to be miserable for forever. I mean, that's not a sustainable model.
And that's not healthy.
It's not healthy. Not at all.
And I point out, I have a couple quick paragraphs if I
Please.
can if I can read. This is from the chapter about Jail 101, a crash course, resiliency. Um, but it says, other than the few simple rules you have to follow, most bets were off. There's no real sense of modesty in jail, in any jail I've been in. At East, we had windows in our doors and had seen each other change and poop and all that good stuff. We talked about our pasts, and it's agreed none of us are perfect. We've all made some poor choices, done some jacked up things. We tried to make as funny a story about it as we could and keep on rolling. It helps if you play spades. I don't. It helps if you speak that special language of rap lyrics and youth. I don't. It helps if you're cool. I'm not. But I get by with my own brand of badass because I'm a nerd and I own that. And I think that's the trick, really, to just be who you are, be comfortable in that, and say, F you if you don't like it because I'm all right. I mean, really, what's more badass than that? Of course, we all have our good days and our bad days, and this is jail, not Disney World. We have a lot of bad days, especially in Rise, where we're exhausted and stressed. But believe it or not, I think most of us have more good days than not, because humans are more good than not. We're resilient. Jail, with all of its quirks and rules and oddities, just reinforces that. They may take away our freedom and our rights, but they never take away our essence, who we are. We're resilient.
Mm, that's good stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that's what struck me was, I went in prepared for, meeting all these awful people who had done awful things, and it turned out like most of them were just like me. and I compared my way in instead of out.
It took me a while before I got to the compare in part.
Yeah.
Um, I constantly, for me, and now actually now that I'm on this side of my recovery and have the benefit of a little bit of time to look back, recognizing that so many of the people I was with were
Hmm.
so young, and I think about, I had years of my life where my addiction was there, and so was an identity that wasn't necessarily just the using part.
Right.
Like they were there, and there was obviously a lot of tension in those things. It wasn't sustainable, but there's an identity forged out of something that I still, I could not look at until the very, very end, where I thought my identity had gone and whatnot. But when I went to jail, like I still, I had that piece of that identity, you know, f- formed.
Hmm.
And so many of these young people I met who just didn't have an identity other than that,
Yeah.
the using and the ways and means to get more. And for I resisted that, and I put my nose down to that. I mean, I did, initially, and I don't know where the change was. Probably with those socks. I mean, I tell that damn story all the time. The kid who gave me socks when I went into the McShin pod. But that was such a transformative moment in my life. That
Yeah.
moment right there, and I didn't. That may not have clicked exactly right then and there, but that began that journey, because by the end of my time in that 50 days, I was in the McShin uh, you know block. We didn't have pods, we had blocks, but that McShin block, that 50 days, I I I found ways to connect with everybody in there,
Hmm.
not everybody was my best friend, but I think I got along with everybody.
Yeah.
We were all McShin, so we all sort of came in. Most of us had an idea that we had some acceptance of what recovery and addiction was,
Some intention.
some intention,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, I would love to say that mine were pure, but I mean, the same guy I was using with the night before, I got well, the morning I got arrested was the same guy who came to pick me up. So I was clearly not
Yeah.
making the best choices
Right.
yet. Probably still, I'm not making the best choices, but I have a network and some tools. But for me, that just warehousing these children essentially, um, and not getting to those root causes, it's sad. It's really sad, and I'm grateful that we get to do this. I'm so grateful that McShin had a pod, at the or a block, where I went to jail, that I had that
Yeah.
opportunity to sort of get connected back to me, to Nathan,
Yeah.
start that journey back, because I just needed that little, you know probably more than that, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
And and yet there's so much we still need to do.
Yeah.
So many other places we need to reach. I mean, I, I, we're at 53 minutes, and I don't want to start rambling about this topic. I want to start going down this rabbit hole, but there's just so much more. Somebody, I don't know who said it, and it's such a great quote. We can, pulling people out of the river, but at some point we need to go upstream. I'm going to mess up the damn quote. We keep pulling people out of the river, but at some point we need to go upstream and figure out why people are getting in the river in the first place,
Yeah.
why they're falling in. And it's like, that's the part that my mind has changed over time. It's like, all right, let's go upstream. Where
Yeah.
do we need to actually get with these? Where do we need to connect with people, youth? But I mean, that's where it starts, right?
Right. And I do. I found it to be a really profound group where we talk about our higher power. And if you could ask one question of your higher power, what would it be? I have gotten some of the most in depth, vulnerable answers to that question.
Hmm.
And the question that I always pose, if I could ask my higher power one thing, how do I get my kids to not follow in my footsteps and make those same bad choices?
Yeah.
Because statistically, just by having an incarcerated parent, they are 65% more likely to be incarcerated
Wow.
themselves. Just by having an addict mother, they are significantly more likely to develop addictive problems in later life. So, I'm still searching for answers on that. I will tell you, for me, what scared me being locked up was, gosh, back one of my first incarcerations at Richmond. there was a 63-year-old woman in there. And I thought, my God, I was, maybe 28. I was like, I don't want to be 63 and in jail and trying to climb up on the top bunk and figure this out.
Yeah.
And I turned 39 my last incarceration and found my first gray hair like in a jail cell. And I was just like, this has got to stop because I'm not even going to get a chance to grow old. And I don't want to grow old in this lifestyle. What was cute and glamorous to me at 20 is not cute on me anymore.
Yeah. And it ceased, it ceased for me, at least it ceased being fun a long time before.
Yeah.
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 It became, we talk about surrendering to a higher
Mhm.
power. I had surrendered to the drugs. I had surrendered to the lifestyle and all that came with it. And it
And
just, I could, yeah.
in active addiction, I think that's where most addicts are existing is like, this is not fun anymore. I'm doing it because I have to, or I feel I have to. And, one thing I stress is you hit the point of surrender, the point of change when the pain of staying the same is greater than your fear of what's unfamiliar in
Mm,
recovery. And, I think that's the real trick. If you can get to that point while you're incarcerated, then take that leap of faith and go from there because it really does get better.
yeah.
It really does.
That's a great note to end on here, Mandy. Is there anything else you want to add before we round off this
Um,
conversation?
State Blues is currently available for sale through Dorrance Publishing.
Uh-oh, do you hear the siren in the background?
I do. They're coming for me.
They're coming for you, Mandy.
At DorranceBookstore.com, which is DORRANCE bookstore.com.
DORRANCE.com.
Yes.
Okay.
DorranceBookstore.com.
Oh, sorry.
But within the next week to 2 weeks, it will be available on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble online, and we are currently in the process of figuring out which bookstores and libraries it will go into.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Hey, make sure you let Honesty and John and everybody know. I'm sure they'll buy a whole bunch to distribute.
Yeah, well, one of the things, the publishing company sent me is I can send a certain number of promotional books to
Mm.
certain places. So Miction's definitely going to be on that list.
Cool. Well, thank you. Our guest has been the fabulous Mandie Brando over here today. I appreciate you coming in, and I know I've never sat in on one of your groups, but just sitting here talking to you today and in the past, I'm sure the work that you do with the women in the Chesterfield house is well received. I'm
Thank
sure.
you.
So, thank you for being here today, Justin. As always, thank you for your fabulous hair.
I was about to say the lion's mane.
The lion's mane.
I'm going to get him some Pantene for Christmas.
And thank you all for listening and being part of this. Hey, we'll see you next Tuesday. We don't have an agenda for next week, and we're about to do some changing around here. So, be on the lookout. We're going to be a little up and down in the next couple weeks, but we've got some plans for January we haven't quite ironed out. So we appreciate you sticking with us. Looking forward to what we got going on. We have some really interesting conversations that we're going to be recording soon too. So keep up to date with what's going on. Appreciate all y'all looking out for us. Take care of yourselves. Happy holidays if we don't see you before then. And thank you, Justin.